Hello, thank you for having me here. So my name is Graham. I'm Director of Innovation Research with Zebra Technologies. We've had a couple really interesting presentations focused on research. I'm going to be showing you something that is more like real-time sausage making, so it's going to get a little bit messy. Because I'm going to talk about how our company has been kind of making a move from a very hardware-centric company to a more of a holistic solutions company. So it's been quite the transition, and I think you'll find it interesting, but it's going to be quite different. So first of all, I'm going to guess that most of you don't know who Zebra Technologies is. It's actually celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. But it's a business-to-business company, and as you might guess from looking at the logo, it has something to do with barcodes. So 1969, barcodes sort of entered the world, and all products started to get labeled with barcodes. There was another company called Symbol Technologies that created scanners. So you had the laser scanner and the barcode, and there was kind of like a revolution in product management, inventory, pricing, and so forth. So you can imagine the use case, pretty simple, right? You've got a package, somebody's got a scanner, you've seen them in the grocery stores, they scan the product, how could it be more difficult than that? So it actually is fairly complex. So this is a fulfillment center, and there's probably hundreds of these across the United States. And they're very, very complex operations. If you think about, you order an Amazon package, and 2 days later it arrives in the mail, and you're able to kind of go online and you can check where it is at any time, or maybe you're getting an email for where its location is. That's all down to our technology. That is what we do. We help companies track and trace products all throughout the supply chain, from manufacturer all the way to consumer. And if you think about it, it's everything. It's medication, it's patients, it's manufactured parts, it's the logging industry, it's anything you can possibly think of. They're all tracked in some way. And nowadays we have more than barcoding. We have things like RFID tagging and all kinds of other things. And then there's a whole communication side to this, is how do you coordinate all these people and all these activities across all these different businesses. So for years, Zebra produced product that captured all this information at the edge. And now we are moving towards more of a solution. So what do you do with that data? You can capture it at the edge now. Now you have to figure out, what are you going to do with that? How can I improve the processes? How can I have people make better decisions based on the knowledge that they have? So we have moved over the last few years from this very, very hardware-centric focus to a very broad solution focus. And we have about 60% of the world market. So it's actually a fairly large company that is kind of behind the scenes. And you can pretty much think about any Fortune 500 company, probably outside of the financial industry. Anybody moving goods is probably using our products, or possibly one of our competitors' products. So productivity, so when we talk about research, we're very much focused on productivity. It's about the processes, the productivity, how do we make it more efficient? How do we ensure that users are safe and not stressed out or anything like that? But it's really about the operation side of it. So we're not really necessarily looking at too much at demographics. There are some differences when we look at perhaps Asia, or we look at retail versus warehousing. But for the most part, it's around the productivity and the different users and what their role is and what they're doing within the chain of the whole supply chain. So here's my second shock and awe slide. So, I took this off our website, and I just threw a whole bunch of our products onto the slide here. And then these are some of our solutions. And you can see in the solutions, we've got data capture solutions, we've got analytics, we've got team communications, we got dashboards so that managers can take a look at the inventory, where it stands. We've got task management so that managers can manage the individuals. There's asset tracking, there's load efficiency. So when they're loading trucks, how efficient can they load that truck? Can they do it a little bit better? So there's all these sort of solutions around it. And then there's all these products. And so, for example, this product here is used in a hospital for a patient, so it's a patient label. You have a product here that's used by field service. Maybe they're out in the field at a warehouse or something like that. We're doing some kind of repair. You've got POS here used by a cashier. You've also got the scanners used by cashiers. You've got printers used at a shipping dock. You've got wearable computers used in a warehouse. You've got card printers used by maybe security at a security desk. You've got heads-up displays, possibly used in a warehouse as well. You've got kiosks used by consumers in a shopping store to check prices. You've got POS scanners. You've got mobile computers used in warehousing. My point being that as researchers, you're probably listening to that and you're realizing there's a lot of different personas here, and there's a lot of different use cases that we have to try and understand, and they're all sort of unique. So there is a lot of work to be done every time we do a program to kind of do a deep dive around certain particular areas. And there's a context around them, whether they're in the warehouse or in the retail environment, and that kind of affects our thinking about what are we really focusing on with these products. So, and then there's also some infrastructure things as well that we get involved in too. But it's a huge variety. And by the way, I have to point out the fact that in the center there, you'll see an NFL football. We actually track NFL football players and the football so that we can actually give statistics to people on how fast, where they're moving, how fast they're moving, and you can get kind of statistics on each player and what they're doing. So that's been the last 2 or 3 seasons we've been involved with the NFL on that. So those are the 2 shock and awe sides. It's tracking everything, and it's an enormous number of use cases. Not enormous, but a large number of use cases. So the team. So after I described all that, you're thinking, wow, we have a huge team. We have in the whole design group, innovation design, we have 38 people, and we have 6 researchers who focus on human factors and research. So we're busy people. The team started with industrial design. It started as a very, very hardware-centric company, so industrial design was kind of the key design group that got it going, and then human factors was involved in it as well. We called ourselves innovation and design for a reason. Zebra is a technology company. It's been a technology company through all its 50 years. It innovates through technology. And design at first was very much seen as a service to the technology. So we made a statement by saying, no, we're going to be innovation design, and we're going to show that we can innovate our products through design as well as we can through technology. So together with design and technology, we can make really great products. And we've actually been very, very successful with that. And I'll show you a couple examples as we go through it. But we have, design research, human factors, user experience, which is now growing because we're really moving towards the solution design side, and then industrial design. So the research side, of course, we're going to focus on the research. We do a lot of direct customer research, which is very much focused on driving innovation. My background is actually industrial design. When I went to school, there was industrial design and it was human factors. UX, design research, all the sort of focused areas of research that we have now, we're still kind of evolving, right? But in my career, I kind of moved towards innovation. And so I work with AT&T and a lot of other companies running innovation programs using design. And as a result of that, I realized very early that I can't do any innovation unless I have really, really good research. Unless I get out there and really understand what people are trying to do, what their challenges are. And so I became sort of involved deeply in research very early on in my career. So that's why I've kind of evolved that now, and now I kind of run the research program at Zebra. And it's been really tremendously successful in helping the company really drive innovation. So we do about 80 customer engagements a year, where we actually go on site with warehouses, with retailers, all around the world. I've had a chance to deliver mail with Royal Mail in the Canada Post. I've watched them, measuring logs at ports in New Zealand. I've been on deliveries in China with couriers, all around the States with retailers. So it's a lot of kind of behind the scenes research, and it's all kind of direct observational and interview kind of research. Solution design research is kind of what I'm going to be talking about in the latter half of the presentation. And that's the real challenge for us now, is how do we figure out how to reframe our research around much more broader solutions, which are fairly complex in a lot of different kinds of verticals. And then the last one is human factors design. So we have a really well-established human factors team. And what we do is, since we're looking at tasks and roles within workplace environments, we do a lot of measurements around. We have EMGs that we run on the arms and goniometers to do wrist movement. And we'll actually run users through tasks, you know, like a picking task from shelves or a cashier's task or something like that. And we'll measure the amount of work that they're actually doing, and we'll measure the time that they're taking to do the work. And between the two, we can calculate a form of productivity. And it's about the performance. You know, the human factors originally was really about making sure the user was safe and making sure there's not too much strain on the muscles. But now it's measuring this productivity, which is really valuable. And it can be very, very subtle things. It can be the center of gravity, the balance. You know, we have some products that are fairly heavy and very, very robust. So we have to be very, very careful about the design of them. You saw on one of the slides we have wearable computers. They're kind of more attachable. So you've got terminals here, and you've got scanners on fingers and so forth. So there's a lot of challenges around that. We also do heads-up displays. Heads-up displays are really challenging because you're not talking about somebody just maybe playing a game or just trying out a Google Glass for a little while. You're talking about any worker in maybe a warehouse environment who's going to run a shift of maybe 4 hours using a heads-up display. So you have to deal with all the physiology. You have to deal with interpupillary distances. You have to deal with eye challenges. And you can't really exclude anybody. So the ergonomics around it are really challenging. So we have a really first-class human factors lead on that. So those are the three areas of research. So the user workflow research. So like I said, we do about 80 a year. We have usually somebody out at least every second week at some depot somewhere doing interviews, observational research. Usually it's like a day and a half to 2 days, where we're trying to, as much as we can, immerse them in what the operation is and the functionality and what the goals are and what are their KPIs and what's driving them and motivating them. We discover that really we have to, the customers don't really care about what we're doing. They care about their processes, how productive and how efficient their processes are. Let's see. So we have over the last few years, I'd say the last 10 years, we've built up a relationship with the account teams. So whenever we go in to do one of these sites, we don't go in on our own. We're going in with an account team who's responsible for that company. And we've built up sort of a trusted advisor status. So now account teams will bring us in when they think there's an opportunity or an issue to talk to a customer about their future plans and so forth. And we're brought in because we're not a sales visit. So we're not going in there trying to sell them something new. We're going in there to kind of learn and understand what the customer is doing. And the customers, for the most part, who really want to have more efficient operations, look to us as a partner to kind of come in as experts to kind of look at what their operation is. And we do a read back to that customer to say, this is what we saw in the operation. This is what's working. This is what we think might sort of improve it. And it's very much a non-sales thing. And we'll do it eagerly because basically what we're doing is trying to build up our knowledge, our internal knowledge of all the different kinds of customers out there. Because typically with the product development programs, we don't have the chance to get out and do a lot of research before the product starts development. I mean, this is pretty fast-moving development. So we have to kind of bank our knowledge in all these different areas. So by building the relationship with the account teams, and we'll do presentations to the account teams, we'll do presentations to the engineering organizations, we'll share the research that we found with some of the engineering teams, I mean, you've got engineers who are focused on laser scanners, and they're sort of in their cubicle focused totally on laser scanners. And we'll come in and we'll do a presentation around, this is what's important to customers. This is how a receiving process works. This is how a customer engagement works in a retail environment. And so we're very much about facilitating the research. We try hard to get it out to as much of the organization as possible so that there's a general focus on customer understanding throughout the organization, whether it's engineering, the account teams, or whatever. So over the last 10 years, it's worked out really well because now we have a database where people can go and look at research in different areas and look at the differences between warehouses here and warehouses there. And that has built up a reputation for us where people will come to us when they want to understand something about the customer. So because we kind of share it out there so freely, they're seeing us as sort of the experts in this particular area. And so there's a much greater likelihood of the account teams and those people coming to us to talk to us about, what should we do in this particular area of the customers. And so we get invited out quite a bit to engage with the customers. So I'll talk about one example here. This was a really terrific quote that was given to one of our product management teams, and we actually loved it. So I think the quote's probably about 10 years old, but I still use it because it's such a wonderful quote. It says, "It's nice that you're making smaller devices, but here's what I'm interested in talking about. Where's my next 20% productivity boost coming from?" So typically the product management team will go out with a device and they'll go to the customer and they'll say, "So what can we improve on this device? What features do you want on this device? How big do you want the next display on the next version of this device to be? Where do you want the buttons to be?" There will be very transactional questions around how do you want the next product to look. And typically the customer will say, "Well, the battery door keeps coming off. Can you fix that?" Or little things that are not going to help you design a product that is intended for the next 5 years. So there's no sort of future thinking from the customers. They know their processes and how they work very well, and they know what's challenged about their processes, and they know what's challenged about the device. Ultimately, we understand that they don't really care about our devices, and we take that as a starting point. What they care about is making their receiving process more accurate, making their shipping process faster, making customer engagements more engaging, better suited. They're about productivity from their point of view. And when this comment was made, back in the early 90s, inventory in warehouses was done with a clipboard and a piece of paper. And so you had someone going around writing down what's in inventory and the quantity and so forth. Tremendously inefficient and ineffective. And then we brought in these rugged mobile computers, and the mobile computers would capture the data and would file the data automatically, and all of a sudden you had, like something in the order of a 20% productivity improvement. But sort of since the early 90s, there was really no improvement. It was all just generations of the same mobile computing product. So we went out and we took a look at what's happening in distribution centers and fulfillment centers, which is where your e-commerce products come from. And what we noticed was, in distribution centers in the retail environment, what typically happens is they'll pick a lot of product to go to a store and they'll put it on a pallet, and that pallet of product will be shipped to the store. And if the store gets too much of one product by mistake, they'll put some in the back room. If they don't get the product that they really wanted, then they'll get a shipment later in the week. So they can kind of manage the errors within shipping the pallet, right? It's not really too much of a problem. It'd be nice if it was more accurate, but they can handle that. And that's the way it's been with retail for a long time. Now e-commerce comes along. Now you're not necessarily shipping to a store, you're shipping to an individual. And now you have to get that accurate. It has to be exactly accurate. So what they were doing is telling their pickers, and by the way, this is a picker in a fulfillment center. He's got a scanner, and what he's doing is he goes, finds that you order an item, he goes and finds that item, he scans the item, he scans the shelf location where that item is currently stored, and then he scans the bin in which he's putting it into, and then eventually it'll be shipped to you. So he's doing 3 scans. So in order to ensure that this is very, very accurate, that the customer is going to get the right product, they're asking their users to check the screen. every time they do a scan. So he's doing a scan, 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 and now he's doing a scan, check, scan, check, scan, check. So they've introduced a small amount of extra work into it. And they would look at that and say, that's fine. That's exactly what we want them to do. They're checking to be sure it's correct. Good. They don't see any issue with that. So we looked at that. We went out and did some observational research. We looked at that. We realized that there's kind of a problem here. All of a sudden, they've introduced a lot more time and a lot more physical effort into this. So we started doing the math around it. And it's like if you do 120 picks per hour and 10-hour shifts, and you got 5 shifts a week, and you got 400 pickers per center, and you got 65 fulfillment centers, that millisecond of time to check the screen actually turns out to be a lot of effort and a lot of time. And when you think about the whole operation. So we did a redesign. So we did, this is the traditional product, a very rugged mobile computer. You can see the orientation of the scanner straight at the front. The display's on top, and it's got the physical keypad. That configuration of scanner has been around like 20, 30 years, since the early 90s, right? It's big, it's survivable, which is what they really like. You can run a forklift over it, it'll still keep going. People have dropped it off carports, and it still survives. In fact, some of the marketing videos are kind of like that. So we did a redesign. So we did the research around this. We did a conceptual design effort around this, and we actually did lots of modeling around it and lots of geometry around it within the design team. So we haven't told the business about this yet, and we've already got a configuration and design. And you can see what we've done. Obviously, we've taken the screen, we've verticalized it, we've gotten rid of the keypads because now Android is coming in, and we've got virtual keypads. We can do more with that. And we've put the camera and the scanner in alignment. So now there's a camera in line with the scanner, so you can actually look through the screen virtually and see what you're scanning at. So that was entirely done within the design team, and we pitched it to the business, and now it's a product. So it actually went into production. So the genesis of this product was based on research we did in the field, an issue that we identified as significant, and we created a design based on that. We did all the human factors testing around that. It's about a third lighter. The ergonomics are a lot better. It's more survivable. There's a lot of different improvements. And then we pitched it to the business and said, this is something we really should consider doing. And the business agreed. And we went into production with it, and the market for it is growing. You know, this market on the left here is probably one of the most successful products we've ever built. It's everywhere in back warehouses. I mean, there's millions of these products out there. And it was quite striking that we had the most successful product ever, and we said, well, that's not good enough. We can do something different. So we did something different on the most successful product we ever had. And now actually what we're doing is we've introduced that product. It's doing quite well and growing as people move away from hard keypads. But we also redid a version of this as well, because this is so popular that people just want to sort of upgrade the products that they already have and want to keep something similar. So we've got a new version of that and that product out in the market, doing quite well. So up to now I've been talking about an individual product and the workflow around that. And you know, we never look at the product like the product managers do. We look at the receiving process, or we look at you know, the customer engagement or the shipping process and so forth. And now we're starting to look at operational workflow. And we're trying to get our heads around, okay, we're going to become a solution company. It's no longer about capturing the data on the edge. Now the game and the future is about what are you going to do with that data, and how are you going to make operational decisions, both real time and maybe planning decisions with our technology and our solutions. So, you know, we wanted to understand operations and business processes. We are already doing a little bit of that in what we're already doing. We wanted to understand critical decisions and timelines, key performance indicators. So as much as possible, we want to understand how warehouses operate, how a hospital operates, how, you know, nurse medication delivery, how ports work, and so forth. So there's a lot there to sort of take in. So what we did was we started to try and model this up just for our own thinking, to rethink how do we reframe the way we do research. It's no longer about individuals and individual processes. So we were kind of inspired by a Harvard article from 2014 where they were looking at John Deere tractors, and they were talking about the tractor, and then there's the smart tractor, and then there's the connected tractor, and then there's, it goes all the way up to the point where you have a basic tractor, you have a tractor where you can see some information on the performance of the tractor, you have a tractor where you can see remotely some information on, and then it gets all the way up to you can watch the markets, or you can watch the weather, and you affect the operation of the tractor through tracking things that affect agriculture in general. So we were looking at, okay, so we're way over on the far right now, where we're looking at function. And we always sort of looked at use case to sort of help us decide on function. And we wanted to kind of model out process, operation, business. And then, so I've put an example here of transportation, logistics, warehouse, fulfillment, item picking, locate. And so those are different levels of granularity. And let's see if this works. So for example, the information and data at each level is quite different, and the solutions that they have at each level are also quite different. So at the highest levels, they're talking about changing suppliers, seasonal issues, order changes, fleet management, fleet maintenance. At the warehouse, it's more about inventory management, receiving, shipping. At fulfillment level, it's more about workflow management, label printing, equipment layout. And then you're down to the individual at an item picking process, and it's about ensuring the correct picks, item accessibility, timely picks, and then you're down to kind of the product level, where it's about the print quality, the decode accuracy. And so you can see that at each level, there's different things you're going to be concerned about and you want to get right. And then also, there's also different data that's either being captured or needed at those different levels. So at the function level, it's like captured ID, photos, Wi-Fi coordinates. At the top level, it's order statistics, sales projections, road conditions, and then you can kind of see the progression all the way down. And so what we did is we kind of tested out and it kind of works generally across all the different kind of verticals that we're involved in. And so we're not mapping out all of this, but what we're trying to do is set a framework for how do we do research for solutions at different levels. And as we target particular areas based on what the business wants to do, we can kind of dive in a little deeper with these and figure out exactly, what are the issues that are important at each level of the solution. So for example here, this is transportation logistics. So under transportation logistics, you have warehouses, stores, fleet management. Under the warehouse operation, you've got fulfillment, receiving, shipping, transport, and you can imagine if you switch to store, that process line would change. And then under fulfillment, you've got the use cases of item picking, item put away, item packaging, exception handling, shelf replenishment. And then under that, at the product level, you've got very specific things around print, communicate, dimension, locate, and so forth. And so what happens is, in the current state, is the engineering development teams, as I kind of mentioned, is looking really down at the function level. They care about what do I have to design for, how much is it going to cost me, are these the features and functionality that the customer wants? So they're relying a lot on the customer to tell them, what are the specifications of what I want to build. And we've always been here at looking at what are they actually trying to accomplish. Not just the features and functionality. What is it that is driving them? What are the KPIs? What are they really interested in? What are things distracting them and challenging them? One thing on both software and hardware is that the user is focused on finishing a task. They've been told to do a task, and they will do that task. And if the product or software is getting in the way of that, then they will either ignore it, do it the old way, or they'll figure out some kind of workaround, and it won't be as effective as you really wanted it to be. So they'll be, they will be laser focused on, I've got to accomplish this in a certain amount of time. If this is helping me, that's great. If it's making me more productive, that's great. If it's not, then I'll figure out a way not to use it, or break it, or do a workaround or something like that. So we're always been focused there. And now a challenge is to move higher up the chain. So we're now solution research focused, and we want to influence everything downstream from that, down to the product. And so, that is where kind of the challenge stands now, where we're looking at how do we reframe the way we look at a potential solution, and how do we analyze it, and how do we communicate that to solution architects and to UX team members around this is the way we think the solution should work. And that's where we started to try and use the service design methodology. And the service design methodology was something we were always aware of, but we always kind of thought of it as, it's the consumer going through the retail experience, or it's somebody going to the financial website and getting services and so forth. And it's been very much around what is that individual's experience and how do you improve that experience. But we didn't necessarily have that kind of an operational model in what we were doing. So we wanted to be able to understand multiple interweaving workflows because there was a lot of people involved at the solution level. We needed to have something where we could understand the complexity and dependency of the interactions and also align it with the data flow, because you have the interactions of the individual in an operation, but you also have the data is also flowing around. People are capturing data, people are making decisions on data, maybe in real time, maybe for future planning and so forth. And so we started to model out, this idea of approaching a solution where we understand the current state of the operation within the warehouse, and we go through the iterations of identifying the opportunities, creating concepts, determining implications, and then defining sort of a vision strategy. So basically figuring out a way, how do we communicate this out as cleanly as we can to the people who are going to take it in, product management, solution architects, UX architects, and so forth. So just to give you an example, direct store delivery is, you may not know that one either, but that is kind of an industry all to itself. And you can kind of think about the delivery driver of some kind of particular goods to a store. So what big box stores do is they basically essentially rent out space, shelf space. So each vendor gets a particular amount of shelf space. And very often they're responsible for keeping the displays looking good, keeping the seasonal and promotional sales up there, making sure that there's no gaps in the inventory. And so you have this whole suite of merchandisers who are going around from store to store to fill up the displays or to make sure the seasonal promotion is up or something like that. So there's a whole industry around this, and it's a lot of major retailers. I'm showing one particular one here, but their goal is to engage with the store managers. What they want their people out in the field to do is to be able to talk to the store managers, store owners, and build the business and talk about promotion, talk about what's going right and what's going wrong. What gets in the way of that is the routine tasks. So they look to us to help them figure out, how do I make the tasks here a lot simpler? How do I make it so that my people out in the field, and these people are, they're not all looking at one website, or they're not in one office, they're just completely spread out. How can I make them more efficient so that they can engage more in customer relations? And how can I leverage the data that they're capturing to make our operations more efficiently? How can I know that the display needs so much more items for sale, or how do I know what's in the warehouse so that I can order more and so forth? And then they want to grow their market share. So DSD is a pretty critical business. And you think about it, and there's a lot of personas involved here. So you've got people on the manufacturing side, you've got people in the DSD workforce itself, you've got people in the store, and all of these different personas are interacting with one another in order to make the operation efficient and effective. And by necessity, you have to engage with the store because they're giving you the shelf space, renting out the shelf space for a certain amount. The workforce is out there. There may be, these are different roles. So you may have one individual doing 2 or 3 roles, but we break them down by roles just so that they're very clear about which ones they are. And then, of course, you've got the manufacturer themselves, everything from brand promotion to production to sales to dispatch to fleet management and so forth. So there's a lot of players. There's a lot of players in just DSD business. And so what we do is try to look for solutions and opportunities in that business so that we can sell our products and solutions into them to make them more efficient, more effective, and hit the goals that I mentioned on the last slide. So service design methodologies. So we've started to use, obviously we use personas as well. This is actually a persona from something else, but I kind of threw it in there just to give you an example, where we're looking at, what is the customer challenge and what are the personas playing a role in that. And then we're mapping out, I guess in a lot of journey maps, you'd see one sort of customer journey through a website experience or a store experience, retail experience, or something. Here we have, a multitude of players working on an operation. And each one of them is either capturing data at some point, receiving data, making decisions at critical points. Maybe they're directly engaging with each other, to change information or to change product or something like that. So there's a lot of back and forth interactions happening to make the operation successful. So this is the challenge: is how do we cleanly sort of describe that so that the solution architect or the UX team can understand what it looks like now, and then we can kind of brainstorm about what are the possibilities for the future or where are the opportunities to do something where we can improve on it. So the other side of it is the data itself. So you've got 2 flows. You've got the workers and the engagement between each other and being more effective, and then you've got the data side. And there's different kinds of data. In this particular case, this was for DSD. We've got information on the truck and the logistics. So they have to maintain the fleet. That's a critical part of what they do, although it doesn't seem directly the first purpose, but it is a critical part. There's information on the product. There's trend forecasting, transportation logic, brand goals, information about demand. So there's, people in the back office need to know about demand so that they can either order more, produce more, and so forth. And then they've got to maintain the fleet. They've got to look at what the trend analysis is. So there's a lot of information to kind of capture, and it's flowing to all those different individuals. So we make sure that we understand where the data is going and who needs the data, when they need it. And it could be about real-time decisions or forecast planning decisions. And then we'll actually go so far as to, that's okay kind of for the architect, but we'll map it out and storyboard it, because we'll bring in customers and we'll kind of validate our thinking. And we'll ask them, does this look right? Does your operation work differently? Because frankly, all of them are a little different. None of them are the same. And they've all got their different nuances, but we've got to figure out a way to do a solution that's going to cover as much of this as we possibly can. Because we very rarely do custom for individual customers, unless they're really large. And there actually are some very large customers out there, I think you can imagine. So we actually even created a storyboard tool where researchers can just drag and drop backgrounds and figures and elements into it and create their own storyboards quickly enough. And then we kind of try to tie that in with a very, very general data flow. And then we'll post a note. This is actually done on Miro, real-time board. So we could do it remotely because we've got teams in Taipei, Chicago, Long Island, and London. And then this is some examples of some of the research that was done that supports this. Oh, and I should point out that this is not DSD. I just kind of threw this in there as an example. This is actually click and collect. So this is you're buying online, and somebody in the store is picking the grocery items for you, and then you're picking it up at the store, or it's being delivered. So that's another business that we're also looking at. But that gives you an idea of mocking up storyboarding and so forth. And then out of that, we do a lot of brainstorming with the team, and we pull out ideas. And this was done about 3 or 4 years ago, but it shows there's things around fleet management. What could we do around solutions for fleet management? What could we do around routing? So if you want to go to a destination, you put in the destination in your GPS, and it gives you a map to it. But here you have a delivery person who's going from store to store. So is there a way for him to have GPS mapping to this store? Then it brings up information on what he needs to do or what products he needs to deliver to that particular store. And then it brings up contact information for that store, or maybe it lets the store know ahead of time. And then as soon as he finished there, it pops up the next route. So it's kind of a sequenced GPS with route information and contact information is all combined in one. So very specifically designed for a DSD kind of workflow. And then there's things like cloud. If you've got a particular beverage seller going into a particular pharmacy who both have our devices, can they do a transaction using perhaps our cloud? Because right now they use a very antiquated plug to kind of, the delivery person shares information with the store person. So can we do that in the cloud? So a bunch of ideas kind of came out of that a while back. And that came out of sort of the brainstorming session around what could we do differently here? What could we do that would give Zebra an advantage in the space? And then, and I kind of talked about brainstorming. We have, in a studio, we have these like 4x8 foam core sheets. And we paste everything up there, and we have people come through, either subject matter experts from strategic marketing or from the product management business, or we'll have customers come in, or we'll have partners come in. And every time they do, we take the chance to do some brainstorming and find out, are we on track? Are we not on track? What do you think about this? And so forth. And so it helps with the customers and partners validation. It helps the solution team figure out a focus. And it helps the business team identify opportunities. So it's been really useful, but we're still kind of in the early days of really getting this to be more efficient and effective. And it's still kind of ad hoc. It's not the kind of tight process that you might want. And then this is a video. I don't know if this is going to work. It's probably not going to work because I don't see any video. But if the storyboarding works out, and we think this is a really important solution that we would like to develop, we'll actually create an animated video which will take you through the whole process. And the animated video is just internal, but we can now share that with different management teams. And it's so much more effective than trying to do a PowerPoint each time to kind of pitch this idea to everybody. This way we can kind of show them a video, they get the whole idea, it's encapsulated in like 2 minutes. And they've been really effective. And if you're familiar with industrial design, they're almost always doing the appearance model, and they spend a lot of money on a model that looks, this is the design we want to do. Well, this is essentially what we're trying to do for solution design, is this is the model, this is the video of how it could be. And with that, I'll kind of conclude it. I mean, like I said, this is still real-time sausage making, so there's no answer at the end of the slide here. It's kind of, this is what we're trying to do to kind of move ourselves from thinking around hardware, device, and individual to more solution-oriented. And we've been really trying to leverage more around the service design methodology to kind of help us map out what we think all the interactions are and understand them, and then be able to communicate that to a team, and then be able to brainstorm around that and figure out what should a solution look like, or where in the solution could we play a part. So with that, I'll close it out. And I think I've got, thank you.
Okay, we have time for a couple questions.
Thank you very much, Graham. That's very informative. The question I have is, early on in your presentation, you mentioned you had a lot of findings from your direct observation with clients, and I'm curious. You mentioned banking them, and for reuse later.
Oh, right.
So beyond your mural storyboarding, and what other techniques do you use for that, and also for retrieval once you've banked
so
all
we.
that?
A lot of the research we're doing is behind the scenes in companies. So you kind of have to be there to see it in operation. And fortunately, you can do that. You can actually follow somebody in a receiving process and see how it actually works. We don't do surveys. Our group doesn't do surveys. The marketing group does, because it's about understanding and learning what's going on. And you can't, if somebody answers a really, really interesting question with a really interesting answer, I can't follow up on that, and I can't find out what are they thinking and where does that go. We also don't do focus groups in our team because you have, we're talking about interactions between different levels of operation, and typically in a focus group, you'll either get operations managers, or you'll get IT managers, or you'll get users. But usually, a mix is kind of difficult in a focus group. So almost always, we're going out to customers. It's almost always observational research, on-site interviews. We'll talk also to subject matter experts in the account teams and so forth, and other people who have been out to customers. But that is really the focus, because it's all about us understanding operations, and that we find that that's really the only most effective way we can do it. So.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any advice for how to implement any recommendations or solutions that you're proposing. I know that you really laid out clearly the service design blueprinting phase, the stakeholder collaboration, getting everyone on board, but how do you convince all of your stakeholders to actually go forward with a pilot, and then how do you implement those changes?
So usually we're working with the business, or there's some aspect of the business. So we can prototype out, and we can show a vision, and we're not doing it totally in isolation, even though that one example I told you happened to be in isolation. But we're usually working with a product team in a particular area, strategic marketing or product. And so there is some level of buy-in about this. We know this is an area we need to go after, and what's the best way to go after it. Sometimes there's this desire to leap ahead and just create some solution that functions really well, but of course, the user gets tripped up because it doesn't really fit the way they work and so forth. So we have to kind of backtrack a little bit. So it's not a clean process, but under normal circumstances, we're working with the business to kind of help define it. And the solution architect and the UX, of course, is part of our team as well.
We want to make sure everybody gets their full time for lunch. So if you have any questions for Graham,
I'll be around.
Find them after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.